And welcome everyone to the debut episode of the Standing 8 Count podcast. I am your warm and convivial host, Carlin Barsley, here to guide you through some face-punching, bare-knuckle boxing action. And joining me as my co-host, he is the brains of the operation. He is the licensed Ontario boxing judge and a lifelong fan of the sport, the Wolverine himself, Mr. Sean W. Smith. Sean, how are you doing, brother?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I should add, I am an amateur boxing judge, so yeah.
Well, you still have to take a license for that, though, don't you?
Absolutely, yeah. I had to take a course. You have to do some practice rounds at live events, and then you get. Now I'm able to do live events with my scorecards counting. So
that's cool. How many amateur events have you done so far?
Not very many, 2 or 3, I would say. There's not a lot going on in Ontario, unfortunately. It is picking up, but there's different levels. So where I am as a new judge, I just get to do a lot of the younger guys or the inexperienced guys. But I'll definitely work my way up, and we'll see where that goes.
Well, that's awesome, man. And like I say, you are the brains of the operation. You're the guy who can watch it with a more keen eye. I myself, I am a lifelong boxing fan. I've trained a bit, but as far as the actual technical stuff goes, I'll freely admit that this is not what this show is going to be about. I'm looking forward more to just discussing boxing, the sport as a whole, where it is, where it's going, where it's been, and having some fun along the way doing it with my good friend, the Wolverine.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we're not going to get too technical on here. We're not going to, we're not going to break down every aspect of the fight. We're not going to talk about, who throws this punch better, who throws that punch better, because like you said, you haven't trained that much, I haven't trained that much. That's just not what we do. So we're going to talk about, the main themes of the fights, how they impact, what kind of impact they have on viewers, and what a good fight is, what you should look forward to, whether or not a fight the weekend before was good, and we're just gonna take it week by week, and we're gonna keep working at it and try and get better every week. So we hope you stick around.
Absolutely. Well, hey, with this happening right now, are you not riveted? Are you not entertained? How could you not want more of this?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is riveting stuff right here.
This is as good as it gets. No, I'm just kidding. I hope it gets better than this.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, exactly. But the other thing we also want to shine light on is the Canadian boxing scene. We're both proud Ontario residents. We don't have a lot going on, as you said off the top, in Ontario, but Montreal has a very thriving scene. And in our opinion, not enough people are talking about that. So hopefully that's one thing we can turn people on to, is more Canadian boxing, because there's a lot of great stuff out there.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, it's mostly in Montreal, in Quebec. There's so many great boxers coming out of that area. Ontario has a scene that's kind of coming together, and there's a little bit on the East Coast too. But Montreal is really the hub of pro boxing in Canada. So we just want to shine a light on that. There's not a lot of English-speaking media that really focuses on it, unless there's a monster fight, unless it's Jean Pascal versus Sergey Kovalev. There's so many shows. There's almost a show every weekend with really good prospects on it, and nobody talks about it. So we really want to kind of shine the light on them and give them a little bit of props.
Absolutely. And just a divergent to go off on a tangent here. Why isn't there more boxing in Ontario? We're the largest province in Canada. We've got a great grassroots base of boxing fans. Why are we not getting more events?
Well, I think you know the answer to this, Carlin. You know this probably better than I do, but I think our commission has a lot to do with it here in Ontario. It's very expensive to put on events. It's very difficult to put on events. What do you call Ken Hayashi?
Executive director, commissioner, whatever.
Sure, yeah.
Clueless leader, there's one.
Our commissioner or executive director is very hands-on with matchmaking, and it can be very difficult for promoters to put on events. And then when you've got all the fees, it's way more expensive to put on a show in Ontario than it is in Quebec or Alberta or on the East Coast or anywhere else in Canada. So for the most part, I think people try to avoid it. But there are a few promoters in boxing who are trying to bring the sport back. United Promotions comes to mind. But yeah, for the most part, people avoid Ontario just because of the expensive fees.
And it's not just the fees. I mean, the fees are a big part of it, and that's the reason we don't get MMA shows the way we would want to in Ontario as well. It all goes back to Hayashi, of course. But I was reading earlier in the year that Yvon Michel, he had Al Heyman's backing. He wanted to throw a big, big card in Toronto, and the issue came down to hand wraps. That's what was reported in the Toronto Star. Anyway, you aware of that?
Yeah, I heard about that. I heard that they wanted to bring the Saki Obika Adonis Stevenson bout, which ended up taking place in Quebec City. I heard that was originally scheduled for Toronto. That's what was reported, and it's a shame we didn't get that fight because that's the kind of big fight. Adonis Stevenson is the kind of big name that might be able to help revitalize the sport in Ontario. And like you're right, I think it did come down to something weird about hand wraps. I think Ontario also has same day weigh-ins for boxing. That's what someone from United Promotions told me, and I think that can kind of be something that would kind of make people not want to come here. But we know. I mean, we're both MMA fans as well. For the UFC, they have the weigh-ins the day before, so that's something I still need to look into and get a little more clarification on. But there is, I did hear that it was the hand wraps.
Because Quebec allows more hand wraps, a greater length of hand wrap than Ontario does. And for a guy who swears that he's only in it for safety, that the safety is paramount above all else, that's Ken Hayashi's mantra to the media anyway. Why wouldn't he allow more hand wraps? Wouldn't that make it safer?
Yeah, I don't really understand this. Why you would throw away this opportunity to bring millions of dollars in money to the economy. Why would you throw that away over something like hand wraps? You had a great article recently about we're going to have a new commissioner soon, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, it looks that way. It's an article at inthecage.ca for those of you who haven't found your way over there yet. Do so. It's fun and it's weird. But apparently, Ken Hayashi is out at the end of the year and will be replaced by John Biggerstaff, who is a former Toronto police detective and now works for the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, which oversees the Ontario Athletic Commission. I don't know yet if it's going to be a good thing or a bad thing. From what I understand, Hayashi wanted someone to replace him that did not have a combat sports background so that he could impart his own ideas about how things should be run. It could wind up being a situation of meet the new boss, same as the old boss, to use the Who there. But everyone's got their fingers crossed. We've been under the yoke of Hayashi for so long that maybe any new name can just bring a breath of fresh air into the proceedings. But again, too soon to tell whether Mr. Biggerstaff will be more reasonable in his dealing with both boxing and MMA promoters, or if we're going to get the same old pile of you-know-what that we get from Hayashi.
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to tell, considering the response or the opinion of Mr. Hayashi, according to most people that I've talked to and most promoters, it really can't get much worse here. I mean, we have maybe 3 to 5 boxing events a year here and 1 or 2 MMA events if we're lucky. So it really can't get much more dire in Ontario. So in my opinion, it has to go up from here. It can't possibly go worse. I mean, if we have any less shows, why do we even have a commissioner?
That's a good point. And the other point to make on that note is that Ken Hayashi gets paid the same whether he runs 100 events or 1. It's a flat fee. It's not like something in Alberta where I know that they are dependent on percentages of the gates for their salary. So yeah, Ken Hayashi can take his 5-week boat trips and not worry about what's going on back here in this province. He gets paid the same anyway. But maybe he did piss enough people off in Al Heyman and Yvon Michel in the UFC as well that enough people got together and said, listen, we got to get rid of this guy. Otherwise, you're just chasing money out the door. And we know with our Ontario provincial government right now, they are looking at a serious cash shortfall. They're looking to make as much money as they can off anything right now.
Absolutely. No, you're right. They are strapped for cash for sure. Do you think that promoters have that much pull? I mean, Yvon Michel, I don't even think he's ever run a show here. So do you think he would have that ability?
Well, Yvon Michel, I think the thing with him is that he'd have Al Heyman's money behind him, and Al Heyman throwing a lot of money around, doing the free TV shows at the PBC and everything else. I think if they can just bring in charts to Queens Park and show, hey, listen, this is the amount of money we would bring in, and then hold up a donut and say, this is the amount of money you're getting now. I mean, that's a pretty easy comparison to make. And we know that Dana White in the UFC, not to get too much in MMA here, we know that Dana White in the UFC will take on anyone that they perceive to be an enemy of their interests. So I'm not convinced that they did not have a hand, at least a small one, in Mr. Hayashi's demise. And I'm sure if Yvon Michel and Al Heyman got together and lobbied as hard as they can, then yeah, that is a big voice that needs to be heard. So I'm not entirely sure what happened there. I'm still trying to get some more pieces as to what finally got Hayashi out the door, but that would not surprise me at all.
No, I agree. You know, like you said, we don't want to talk too much about MMA, but the UFC did have a tentative date scheduled. I believe it was March 7th in Windsor. And that event didn't go through because I believe Ken Hayashi was on vacation or something like that. And
he was on a boat.
It's going fast. And the event didn't end up happening. Rumors are rampant that it was because he was on his vacation and they couldn't get the paperwork done. They couldn't get the tests done they needed to get done. And I mean, it's interesting to see. It's interesting with the timing that it's come out that he's going to leave right around the same time that this event that was supposed to take place isn't happening. So fingers crossed that things get better from here. They can't get worse.
Yeah, Mr. Biggerstaff, if you're out there, if you're listening, all we ask for as combat sports fans, aficionados, anyone that enjoys combat sports, all we're asking for is a fair shake.
Yeah, we just want more events. I mean, we want to support these events, and I think Ontario residents, they want to support these events. And when they know about them, the UFC has done well here. The boxing events at Hershey Center do really well here, even when it's just local stars. I mean, I was at the Denton Daily, Yuri Kalenga, WBA interim cruiserweight title fight, and that building was almost full, almost 8,000 people in there or something for a sport that's apparently dead. Ontario is not the biggest boxing market. We know that, but I think fans are hungry for good fights. And I think with a good commission, I think we can build something here.
Absolutely. All right, well, we've got our intro and our introductory rant out of the way. Let's talk about the biggest event in boxing history this past weekend, the super fight, Floyd Money Mayweather and Manny Pac-Man Pacquiao. This is incredible. I mean, a couple of days ago, we were talking about the numbers, and it appeared it was 4 million on pay-per-view then. Kevin Iole of Yahoo Sports now saying it could be upwards of 5 million people that paid $100 to see this event. I mean, these numbers are astronomical, Sean. Yeah,
they're saying, I believe Iole said upwards of 5.6 million or something like that. If I'm not mistaken, I think the record before this was 2.2 for Mayweather De La Hoya. I think that's accurate. I could be wrong, but I mean, we're talking, 2.5 times that. It's absolutely insane, the numbers that this fight was able to do. And it's a shame that so many of the mainstream fans, quote unquote, walked away with a sour taste out of this.
Yeah, let's talk about the fight itself. I don't think I'm pulling the sheets on anyone when I say it perhaps wasn't the most aesthetically pleasing fight in the world. I mean, Floyd gonna Floyd, right? He did the classic Mayweather. He lead back. He made himself very, very hard to hit. He established that straight right counter early, which I think kind of spooked Pacquiao. But in a larger sense, what did you think of the fight? Was it worth the money? Was it worth the hype? Was it worth all the time?
Well, I mean, this is what's so confusing to me with these fans that, these one-time boxing fans, what did you expect? I mean, I guess they expected Hagler Hearns just throw down until someone can't stand anymore. But if you've ever watched Floyd Mayweather fight, you are not going to get that. He is a defensive mastermind, one of the best defensive fighters of all time. He uses that shoulder roll really well and protects himself. And like you said, uses that right straight to keep opponents at bay. And that's exactly what he did with this fight. That being said, I don't think that Mayweather can shoulder all the blame here. Pacquiao, whether he was injured or not, didn't really throw that many punches. I think Mayweather threw and landed more punches throughout the fight. So although Pacquiao was coming forward, he wasn't really throwing a lot. I mean, overall, I thought the fight went pretty close to what I thought it would be. I picked a Mayweather decision, and that's what happened here. It went the same way that most Mayweather fights do. And just when we're talking about these mainstream fans, I'm just absolutely perplexed as to what they thought was going to happen.
Well, I think what they thought was going to happen, because clearly over 5 million people buying this fight, they aren't the hardcore boxing fan base.
No.
They got caught up in the hype. They got caught up in the fight of the century talk. That they got caught up in. This fight is 5 years in the making with the two greatest boxers on the planet. So if you go in there without any frame of reference and with that mentality, you had to expect more than what you saw. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's a fair statement, but I mean, the people that I saw on Twitter, and they were just like, absolutely, like, why do we wait this long? Like, I think even like Mike Tyson was on there, like, we waited 5 years for this. I think Evander Holyfield had some kind of comment, but yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's like, is there an expectation when you're getting paid as much as they were getting paid to put on a better show? Maybe a little bit, but just knowing Mayweather's style, there was just no way he was going to put himself at risk in this fight. And I mean, there's so many good fights happening right now in boxing. I think boxing is very alive. I hope that people who were thinking about becoming boxing fans aren't scared off by this.
Well, let's hope. I mean, the undercard, I thought, was another really missed opportunity on their part. I mean, they could have put some really exciting fights on the undercard, and even if people had bought the fight and said, well, you know what, Maypac wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I really like this guy I saw in the undercard. I want to pay money to see him fight again. But the undercard, kind of a dug. Lomachenko looked all right. Yeah. And then the other fight was someone fighting their accountant or something. I couldn't really follow that. But that may have been even more boring than Mayweather and Pacquiao, in my opinion.
They were just both really mismatches. I mean, Lomachenko looked good, but he was fighting someone that we'd never heard of. If you put him in there with a quality opponent and they have a great fight, I mean, it helps build anticipation for the main event, even if that building is almost empty, which was kind of crazy. The other fight, I think, was Leo Santo Cruz. He beat up some guy that we've never really heard of, came in on 2 or 3 days' notice, I believe.
It was his accountant. I'm almost certain on that point.
We've got a 95% absolutely certain. And he just beat him up. And I mean, some people enjoy that, but I think if you put two competitive fights there, you really help the main event along, because even if the main event isn't great, I mean, at least the people saw two excellent fights. Here we had two fights that were okay, but they were super one-sided. And then we had a fairly mediocre, fairly uneventful main event, and I think that just left a sour taste in most people's mouth, because you see three fights and none of them are kind of the barn burner you were looking for. You go, okay, this must be what boxing is.
That's a very good point. And that's probably what a lot of super casual fans, the ultra casual set, to the people that bought this fight just because of the hype, that maybe is what they're walking away with, and that is unfortunate, because this was boxing's big chance to win over so many new fans. There's so many more eyeballs on this fight than anything else, that you have to think they underperformed in that respect.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, like you said, this was the big opportunity. This was the chance to have people, watch this fight and go, oh, wow, that was a lot of fun. I wonder who else I need to check out, or I need to watch these two guys fight again. Instead, we saw, like I said, Mayweather used that shoulder roll, used his excellent movement. And I think Mayweather put on a masterful performance. I mean, he absolutely schooled Pacquiao, despite what Skip Bayless and others think. But that doesn't mean it was exciting. I mean, Mayweather, he used his skills and did what he had to do, but it was not an exciting bout for sure.
Yeah. Let's talk about the fight itself. I mentioned that Floyd was able to land that straight right counter early. Do you think that made Pac wary of lunging in?
I think so, yeah. I mean, he would back Mayweather up, and it looked like, okay, here goes Pacquiao. He's going to have this opportunity, and then Mayweather would land a strike or two, and he'd move out again. And I think it's unfair to say that Mayweather was running. I don't think he ever ran from Pacquiao, but he used good movement. I mean, he's not going to stand in front of Pacquiao and take shots. I don't know what the explanation is for Pacquiao's lack lack of punches. I mean, lack of ability to throw and land punches. I mean, maybe it was the rumored shoulder injury. Maybe he was just kerfuffled with Mayweather's style. I don't really know, but yeah, I mean, I thought it was okay. I think most boxing fans thought it was an okay fight, and I think the mainstream fans kind of just thought it was a dud.
Yeah, and on Manny's part, even he had those couple of good flurries in the fourth and the sixth, but
yeah,
he really seemed to have trouble covering the angles and trouble pivoting. Could it be that Manny's legs are just done? We'll talk about the shoulder in a minute, but could Manny's legs just be done at this point?
That's very possible. I mean, he's 38 years old. He's the older fighter here. Everyone talks about, is this the end for Mayweather sort of thing? But Pacquiao is the older fighter. Like you said, he was unable to cut off the ring. He didn't look that fast. I mean, for Pacquiao to win this fight, he was really going to have to use his speed, use his combinations, and we didn't see any of that. He'd come forward. He tried to square up with Mayweather, and I think that was where he went wrong, because he tried to go face to face with Mayweather, but he really needs to be in kind of on the angle, especially if they're on the ropes, where make it so that Mayweather can't just scoot out of there so easily.
And Floyd, he repeatedly was holding the head of Pacquiao, and the referee seemed quite content to allow him to do that. Were you disappointed that there wasn't even a warning at any point for that?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of expected that when they picked Kenny Bayless to be the referee. I mean, he's always been, I'm not going to say a pro Mayweather referee, but he's always kind of allowed that stuff to go, and is most prominently displayed in the Mayweather fights. So I don't think that impacted the final score. I mean, even if you take a point from Mayweather, he still dominated this fight. But yeah, I mean, I would have liked to see the ref be a little more hands-on, because it did happen so often.
Was the size of the ring an issue? I mean, this to me was shades of Sugar Ray Leonard and Marvelous Marvin Hagler, which we're going to talk about a little bit more later on in the podcast here. But the size of the ring, it just seemed like Pac, like I said before, couldn't track him down. And while this fight was nowhere near as exciting as Leonard and Hagler, it kind of had that same theme of Floyd was going to stay around the outside because he had enough real estate to do so. Yeah,
I mean, I think I'm pretty sure that Mayweather would have made that a mandatory thing, that to have the monster ring so that he can use his movement, much like Hagler and Pacquiao. They want the smaller ring because they want to fight. They want to get you in those dirty situations, those grinding situations, and make you throw down with them. But when you've got these kind of finesse boxers like Mayweather, like Sugar Ray Leonard, that they want to use their movement. So I'm absolutely sure that Mayweather said, like, maybe he conceded on the gloves because he wanted the bigger ring. I don't know, but I'm sure he got his way with that ring.
Absolutely. And let's talk about the talk coming out of the fight, the shoulder injury to Manny Pacquiao. Apparently he has had surgery to repair it already, but I don't know. Manny, he does have kind of a history of pointing to an excuse when he loses, even going back to the Barrera fight with the gloves.
Yeah.
If he had a shoulder injury, why would he not talk to the NSAC beforehand? He claimed he talked to the USADA. I don't know if these two organizations talk to each other or not, but it seems weird that the Athletic Commission was the only party that seemed to not know that Manny had this quote-unquote injury.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a good explanation. I don't think any of us do, unfortunately. But, he may not have said something because he wanted the fight to go on. I mean, they built it up for this date. If you postpone that, you lose some of those fans, I think, especially, as we get closer to the summer months. I think people are doing other things. I think fights don't do as well in the summer. So the longer you wait, the worse this fight does. And even with losing, I mean, he still walks out with, what was it, $120 million or something along those lines. So I think not saying anything was probably a calculated risk on Pacquiao's part. I think in his head, he probably thought, even if I lose this, like, I still got the big paycheck. I've got my excuse built in. And I think it just, I think it was probably done that way kind of on purpose.
What do you think about people's reaction to hearing that Manny either fought her or he's saying he fought her after the fact, rather? Because it really seems like people are finding one more reason to dump on this fight, and Manny is just kind of serving it up to them.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of interesting because, this really felt like a good versus evil fight. Mayweather was this evil guy. He's got domestic abuse. Pacquiao, he was kind of, even though he's not a great guy, like everyone kind of built him up to be. I mean, he was the hero in this fight. Everyone kind of wanted to see, everyone was saying Mayweather, my head says Mayweather, my heart says Pacquiao. That seemed to be like the common thing. And I think that with this shoulder injury thing, I think that's kind of changed a little bit. I mean, people are looking for reasons to kind of crap on this fight, and this is adding to it, just like you said. And I think it just looks bad on Pacquiao. I mean, just take your loss and kind of move on with it, I think.
I think you may be right on that. For Pacquiao being the quote-unquote good guy, he does come across as, somewhat less than that in the aftermath of the fight. I think that's fair to say. But what about all these people coming out of the woodwork, Sean Smith, and saying, that's it, boxing is dead. That was a nail in the coffin. The sport is over. Pack it up and go home.
Yeah, I mean, these are the same people who, they weren't going to watch the next fight anyway. So the sport's going to go on, as it always has for well over 100 years now. Like the people who are saying that, the people that think boxing's dead, they're not boxing fans anyways. I mean, they only watched this fight because it was the hip thing to do. They're not going to watch the fights this weekend coming up. They're not going to watch the fights the weekend after that. So it's just so easy for them to say that.
Well, I guess so. And I guess I'm just so used to hearing that boxing is dead that this kind of just trickles off my back now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every 5 or 10 years we hear boxing is dead. And it's been that way since the early part of the 1900s. There's always a reason why boxing is supposedly dead or supposedly dying. It never will. I mean, it has peaks and valleys as far as mainstream interest goes. I would never argue that point.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that boxing will always be around in some form or another. People just, people like it. What else can you say? It sells tickets. It sells pay-per-views. People have interest in the sport. People have a grassroots interest in the sport. Boxing is not dead, and I don't think will ever die.
No, I don't think it'll ever die either. I mean, it's going to continue to change, I think. I mean, maybe we'll see thicker gloves as we learn more about, brain injuries and that kind of thing. But I don't think it's ever going to go away. Like you said, like people like to see people fight. I mean, if you're at a bar and you see two people are going to fight, like you're going to run over there to watch it. If you're in high school and you hear that there's going to be a fight on the playground at 12 o'clock, like you're going to run out there and you're going to watch it, because that's just, I mean, I don't know if it's part of our nature or what it is, but we like to see people fight, even people who aren't fight fans. I mean, they're fascinated by it. I mean, and it's just, I really think that people just like, I don't know if it's innately or what it is, but they just enjoy watching people fight. So to have this sport, I mean, I just can't see it going anywhere, at least not right away.
All right, just to tie a bow on this Maypac stuff, HBO and Showtime have combined to bring the fight to NASA. People in space are going to watch this fight. Does that officially make it the biggest fight in the galaxy?
As far as we know, I guess. I mean, unless there's two aliens fighting out there on some kind of bizarre pay-per-view, yeah, I think this is.
Could you imagine, this is a little bit of a tangent, but could you imagine that for whatever reason they're bringing it to NASA and extraterrestrial life sees that and thinks that is their first impression of human life is Mayweather and Pacquiao? What do you think the little green men's response would be to that?
I think they think it's bizarre. I mean, you've got this building where you've got 18,000 people looking down on two people fighting in like a squared circle in a ring. Like, it's just like, I mean, it is bizarre when you think about it like that, but yeah.
Did you think that the first reaction from the aliens would be, why doesn't Mayweather open up more?
Yeah. Why can't Pacquiao cut off the ring?
Yeah. When we're inevitably invaded by aliens, that's going to be their first question to us is, what was the deal? I thought Pacquiao was going to do much better in that fight.
Or maybe because they're mainstream fans, they'll think Pacquiao won. They won't understand the scorecard.
We'll have to explain the finer points of the 10-point must to them.
That's right.
All right. Let's move on now. This weekend, the first weekend after the quote-unquote death of boxing, Sean Smith, we have Canelo Alvarez and James Kirkland going toe-to-toe at Minute Maid Park in Houston, expected to draw 40,000 fans to the arena. Not a bad night's work.
Not a bad night for a dead sport, yeah. I mean, I think, it's kind of a shame that Mayweather-Pacquiao was such, so unexciting for mainstream fans, because here we have an excellent fight that almost promises to be exciting. I mean, maybe this fight, like, I know that it's a massive fight. Yeah, I mean, maybe this should have been on the undercard of Mayweather-Pacquiao. You know what I mean? Like, could have been this opportunity to really kind of put Canelo Alvarez as that next star, because I think when Mayweather and Pacquiao are gone, he's the guy.
It'd be him and Golovkin, I would think.
Yeah, and I think Terrence Crawford is right in there as well. I mean, there's a few guys that could be those next stars, but I really think that they've really built Canelo Alvarez. I mean, even putting him in there with Mayweather, even though he lost that fight, I mean, people now kind of associate those names. So, he is the next star, and definitely the next star in Mexico.
And Mexico is a huge, huge market for boxing, so that does carry a lot of weight. Canelo Alvarez getting the star treatment. So where does that leave James Kirkland in all of this? I mean, can he play spoiler in this environment?
I think he can. I don't think he will. I mean, I think Canelo is a much sharper puncher here, and I think he hits harder. For Kirkland to win this fight, I really think he needs to almost do what Pacquiao should have done and just make this kind of a grinder fight, try and get Canelo on the ropes, try and push him back, and try and, punch on the inside. Don't let Canelo use that reach. Don't let him use those beautiful combinations, and just kind of make it ugly. I think that's what he's got to do here. That being said, I really don't see how he is able to do that. And if this is a close fight, being in Texas, it's going to Alvarez. No question.
Do you think we'll see, with James Kirkland's previous legal troubles, the same amount of moralizing and hand-wringing we saw from certain fans and certain aspects of the media ahead of last weekend's Floyd Mayweather fight?
No, I mean, we're not going to see that at all. And I think, this close to the fight, we've already seen that. We haven't seen that as much. And that's just because, the Mayweather fight had so much mainstream attention, and the mainstream media, they kind of clung on to that. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that, this fight, Kirkland, he's just not getting the same kind of attention that fight did. So if there is any mainstream attention on this fight, it's actually on the fight as opposed to, domestic abuse or whatever the other charges he may have.
What did you think about the reaction of that segment of people that were saying, don't buy this fight because Floyd Mayweather beat his wife? For me, personally, I don't get into that kind of thing, because I think if you're looking at combat sports or any sports really for your moral center, you've completely missed the point somewhere along the line. It's not an issue where you can say, you know what, I want to hold these people up as heroes of humanity or anything of that nature. I just think that if I want to see a Floyd Mayweather fight, I'm looking to see a Floyd Mayweather fight. I can watch him as a professional and condemn him in his personal life and be comfortable on those two separate planes.
It's so tough. I mean, I see this idea. I mean, I bought the fight, obviously, but I see this idea of, maybe we shouldn't be financially supporting someone who does this. And it's different in different sports. I mean, in football, we can just turn on our television and watch a football game, and we don't have to pay them $100 to watch it. So we're not, financially backing that person as much. That being said, as a fight fan, I have to watch this fight. As someone that covers the sport, I had to watch this fight. So I just, there is this weird moral dilemma. I kind of see where people are coming from, but, I have to try and look at them as fighters.
Well, compared to something like movies, then, that's a more direct financial backing that we have to give to go to a theater and pay to see a movie. There's lots of movie stars who are not exactly, bastions of humanity either. Why are we so focused on, okay, well, this guy did this in this aspect of his life, so what I'm going to let that affect my enjoyment of what's happening in a professional setting?
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough to say. We don't. Maybe because it was so much money. I really can't wrap my, I can't put my finger on what separates this from the movies, because I think that is a good comparison. And maybe there is that section of the audience that wouldn't support, they wouldn't go see a movie that had a domestic abuser in it. I'm not sure.
I get wound up whenever I see people get on their moral soapbox and start, telling us what we should and should not do. Because if you look hard enough, we're all terrible people. Maybe not domestic abuse terrible, but we've all got things that we shouldn't have done in our lives. You either learn from them or you don't. And for, as much as I'm an anti-religion kind of guy, I do kind of believe in let he who was without sin cast the first stone, right?
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely like an aspect of that. I mean, this is something that Mayweather has done multiple times. It's not like it was an accident. So I kind of see that as well. But it's so tough. I mean, it's so tough to judge people. It's so tough to say, like, I can't watch this fight because of this person's actions. But, as like I said, like as fight fans, as fight media, we have to watch this fight. I mean, we would be hurting our own careers not to.
Very good point. All right, Sean, we've done enough yakking ourselves about this. What I want to do now is go to the interview with the editor-in-chief for Ring Magazine, Mike Rosenthal. He's a bastion of knowledge, and we're going to talk about Mayweather-Pacquiao, Canelo Kirkland, the Canadian scene, and more. Check it out. And our next guest is the editor of what is called the Bible of Boxing, Ring Magazine, the one, the only, Michael Rosenthal on the program. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. Happy to be with you.
Oh, we're very happy to have you. And being that this is your first time on the broadcast, we'd like to talk a little bit about who you are and how you got to where you are. So how did you get into journalism? Can you just tell us a bit about your journey from just being a boxing fan to becoming the editor of the most prestigious boxing publication out there?
Yeah, I sort of just gravitated to journalism, I guess. I was pretty good at English and writing and that kind of thing, and, suddenly there I was starting my journalism career. I started as just a straight regular news reporter, moved into sports writing, and eventually just found my niche in boxing. I've covered every sport there is, but I would say most of my sports writing career I focused primarily on boxing. I had a weekly column at the LA Daily News in Los Angeles for about 10 years. And then after a couple years after I left that, I started with The Ring and starting in 2008, and here we are.
We've seen a lot of magazines kind of come and go over the past few years, past few decades, really. What do you attribute the staying power of Ring Magazine to?
I think it's just a strong brand to start with. The magazine was started by Nat Fleischer in 1922, which is obviously quite a long time ago. It became sort of an institution, and I think it also has had owners that were sort of just determined to keep it alive. As you probably know, Oscar De La Hoya owns it now, and he's very supportive. He likes the magazine. He likes having the magazine, and so I think he's determined to keep it alive also. So, that sort of thing. And I think the fact that now we're committed to a quality website also contributes to this. Ringtv.com is our website, and so we sort of joined the modern era by really putting a lot of time and resources into that. And I think it's one of the best and most read boxing sites in the world.
Yeah, it's one that I visit pretty often. It's really hard for magazines these days because you can't really break news, and it's hard to stay fresh when deadlines are quite a while before the magazine comes out. How has Ring Magazine adjusted to the changes brought on by social media and the instant availability of news?
Well, that's a constant challenge. One thing that we try to do is we try to have better writing than most of what you see out there on a daily basis, for one thing, and we try to go in depth on things. Again, people, the journalism is done at such a fast pace now because of the instantaneous nature of it. We try to put a little bit more time into it, a little bit more thought, come up with angles maybe that other people don't have, that kind of thing. But you're right on when you say it's a challenge. It really is a challenge.
Right. This is kind of along the same lines, but obviously there's a lot of trepidation about the future of print products, whether it's newspapers, magazines, or whatever else. What do you make of the apparent downfall of print, and do you think it'll survive? And kind of along the same lines, what does the future of Ring look like?
To answer the first part of the question, I think that eventually, and maybe not in the not too distant future, I think all paper publications will go the way of the dinosaur. It just doesn't make sense to me to keep using paper the way we use it when we have tablets and smartphones and everything's going to be electronic. So sooner or later, I think it's all going to go away. Although, there's a lot of people I hear people say all the time, I love having this paper in my hand. For some reason, people just love it. Personally, me, I don't really need it, to be honest with you. I spend so much time using electronic devices that I don't need it, but I know some people still love it. But it's going to go away. The second part was the future of the ring. You said,
yeah. What does the future look like?
Well, I sort of gave you a hint there. Eventually, I'm guessing, maybe it's 10 or 20 years, the physical magazine could go away, but it doesn't really go away. Like right now, we have a digital version of the magazine. It's the same thing. It's just in a digital version. Right. So it's not really going away. It's just going to digital devices. As far as the magazine's existence, again, we got into this before. It's got, strong staying power. I think as long as there's a market for it, as long as there's a market for the brand, which I think remains pretty strong, I think it'll be around. I don't see it going away. The brand is just too strong.
Well, obviously, there's a lot to talk about coming out of last weekend's super fight, Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao. You were there firsthand. What was the atmosphere like in the arena?
It was both electric and sort of surrealistic. There was all kinds of celebrities. I'm not sure I've ever seen that many big name celebrities at a fight before, and I've seen a lot of celebrities at a lot of different fights. It had a lot of star power. And the crowd was really into it. You can tell that they felt they were at something special. The surrealistic aspect of it was, we're sitting there at ringside, and I'm talking to the guy next to me, and I'm going, this is just weird, for all this time and all this hype, we're 30 seconds away from the opening bell to Pacquiao and Mayweather. So it was just kind of bizarre, in addition to exciting. But overall, it was an amazing environment. It reminded me a little bit of the Mike Tyson days after he came out of prison, where he was still pretty good and he regained the championship. It was pretty insane also at that time. So it reminded me of that, maybe even a step bigger than that.
What about the fight itself? Did the fight itself live up to your expectations? A lot of people kind of walking away with a sour taste in their mouth, unfortunately.
Personally, I think the fight was a complete dud. I appreciate Mayweather's ability as much as anybody. What the guy is able to do, especially at his age, is amazing, and you have to appreciate that. If you're appreciate the pure side of boxing. But having said that, that doesn't mean it's entertaining. It's interesting in a way, but it's like watching a chess match or something like that. It's just not entertaining. I personally became a fan because I liked action. I admired guys and liked guys who took risks. Mayweather doesn't take a lot of risks. He takes just enough risks to win the fight, to win rounds and win the fight. And to me, it's just not very exciting. I thought, to be honest, and I was hoping that Mayweather, maybe that Pacquiao would do a little bit more. He didn't do much. I was very disappointed when the fight was over.
Mm-hmm. I'm not going to ask you for your scorecard on the fight, but most people who know boxing at all had it for Mayweather. But then there's these other people, these the mainstream media people. I'll mention Skip Bayless went on television and they cried that it was a robbery, that Pacquiao won the fight. What do you think of the scores of this fight? Obviously, I think you had it for Mayweather. Do you think this is confusing for mainstream fans?
Yeah, I don't mind giving you my score. I had it 8 rounds to 4, but again, honestly, that was really generous to Pacquiao. To me, it had the feel of somewhere between 8 rounds to 4 and 10 rounds to 2, somewhere in there. I heard Skip Bayless use him as an example. And he couldn't have made it more clear to me that he just doesn't understand boxing at all. I don't want to be too hard on the guy. He's a big name guy who's a smart guy and popular guy. That he just doesn't know boxing. For him to say what he said, that implying or saying that Pacquiao was robbed, is just utterly ridiculous. And the fans that came out and said the same thing, I think that they're just blinded by their love for Pacquiao. There's just no objectivity. I didn't have a horse in the race, honestly. I'm gonna judge it objectively, and to me, there's just no question that Mayweather won the fight. And you're right. People who don't understand boxing. They hear a guy like Skip Bayless, who they respect, say stuff like this, and they think, well, then there is something wrong, or maybe there's something wrong, and people are really confused. They shouldn't be confused. Mayweather won that fight.
Right. We've seen a lot of different kinds of controversy coming out since the fight. Do you think we'll see a rematch?
I don't know. I'm not quite sure how to answer that. The reason I thought that I always said the first fight would happen is because there was so much money on the table. You know, as you know, it could get up to like $400 million or something like that, which is just insane. There's also a lot of money on the table for a rematch. It won't be nearly as much as this fight, especially after the way the last fight went and the debacle afterward. But there would definitely still be a big market for this. They'd still make a lot of money, and there aren't a lot of guys out there for Mayweather to fight where he can make this kind of money. You know, and then you have the injury factor, and I guess you can argue, hey, let's see what he can do with two good arms. I guess you can argue that too. The reason that I'm hesitating or hedging here is that I just don't really right now. The way I feel, I don't want to see a rematch. But I guess if they made it, and I would get caught up in the hype a little bit and be interested in seeing it happen. But right now, I really couldn't care less.
Floyd actually floated the idea of doing a 15-round rematch, but there'd be no commission that would sanction a 15-round rematch.
I think he would have to do it in a foreign country or something like that doesn't have the rules that we have in the United States. I don't believe there's a state in the United States that would do it, or Canada for that matter. I think you would have to go to, I don't know, to Asia or something like that to do something like that.
Do you think Floyd Mayweather would go to Asia? Do you think Floyd would fight Manny in Manila or Macau or one of these places?
You know, I doubt it. I doubt it. If that fight takes place, I mean, it'll take place. It'll be a 12-rounder in Vegas, or maybe, who knows, maybe they could decide to do it in a stadium somewhere, maybe in Dallas or something like that. But you know, Mayweather's home is the MGM Grand. That's where he's comfortable, and he lives in Vegas. And that would be the leader in the clubhouse for me. I think that's probably where a rematch would be.
We touched on the aftermath a bit and the Manny shoulder injury. What do you make of all the controversy coming out of that? Do you think that Manny kind of used that as an excuse? What about Manny saying that, well, we informed the USADA, it was the NSAC that stopped the therapy from happening? Do those organizations not talk to each other? I don't know, but what do you make of just the entire aftermath of this?
I think it's sad is what I make of it. It's just really sad. You know, if you had a shoulder injury and you decide to fight, then just keep your mouth shut. You know, don't diminish Mayweather's glory, and that's, you know, he earned it. But this is what it comes down to me, is that they had that questionnaire that they have to fill out before the fight. And there's this very specific question. Is your shoulder injured? And he checked no. Or somebody in his camp checked no. So that to me is pretty damning evidence. I guess we should let this play out. It could end up playing out in court from what I understand. But let's let it play out. But it looks really, really bad for Pacquiao. I mean, it looks to me like they just lied. But again, let's see how it plays out. I don't know. I think what leaves a bad taste in people's minds is you know, Pacquiao's going to make, I don't know, let's just say around $120 million. You know, he hid the shoulder, and if he really had a shoulder injury, he couldn't possibly have given the effort that he would have given if he were healthy. It just rubs a lot of people the wrong way, and it's a really, really unfortunate way to end, you know, a fight that people were so excited about.
And you mentioned that it could play out in court. There are some lawsuits pending against the Pacquiao camp. I know you're not an attorney, but from where you're sitting, do you think that any of those lawsuits have any merit to them at all?
Yeah, like you said, I'm not an attorney. Man, if I had to guess, I think that there's a risk when you buy a ticket to a sporting event or bet on a sporting event that, how do you know? Nobody's 100%. I mean, a lot of guys aren't 100% when they go into sporting events. I don't mean to be arguing for Pacquiao because I don't like the way they handle this, but you know, guys fight, they play hurt all the time. You know, this is just a big one. It's a one-on-one thing. It's not like a player on a football team or baseball team or a hockey team. It's just one-on-one. And if a guy's fighting one-armed, it's a whole different ballgame. It's something completely different. And again, frustrating for people who are hoping that, you know, it was them at their best, you know, against each other, and maybe it wasn't Pacquiao at his best. So again, very frustrating.
Right, of course. We'd be remiss not to at least talk a little bit about the Canadian fight scene, specifically Montreal. That's where all the Canadian boxers seem to go. What do you attribute the rise of boxing in Montreal to?
I think some of it has to do with promoters who know what they're doing and are doing what they're doing. You know, there's promoters there that are smart and aggressive and putting on good shows. There's good fighters in that area. You know, a lot of them are, I think this is a key element. A lot of them are Haitian Canadian.
Yeah.
You know, Adonis Stevenson and Jean Pascal and guys like that. And there just happens to be that French-speaking community there. And, you know, I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but maybe, you know, in the States there's so many different big sports. There's football, baseball, basketball, hockey, soccer, the whole thing. Maybe there isn't quite as much competition in Montreal, which really has just the Canadiens, right, and the CFL team. So maybe there's a market for that might not exist in some other places. But, you know, I went to the Kovalev-Pascal fight, and the atmosphere there was fantastic. It's a wonderful place to watch a fight. And the city's I just love Montreal. The city's such a great place, so it's a really, really good situation there.
Yeah, I was down there for that fight as well, and I definitely agree. The atmosphere was incredible. Do you think we're going to continue to see that scene thrive? I mean, what do you see as the future of boxing in Montreal?
Well, I guess it depends on the personalities that emerge. You know, it's like boxing in general. You sort of need somebody to to push the sport forward. It just so happens right now that there's several guys in Montreal who are popular and big names and are able to attract fans. If suddenly that disappears, then you wonder what's going to happen. You know, I think they're okay for now. You got the guys I mentioned. I really, really like David Lemieux. I don't know if he's going to end up on anybody's pound-for-pound list, but he's really, really fun to watch. Good-looking kid. But who knows? I mean, who knows what the future holds? You got to have the fighters, the horses. If you don't have them, then what do you have?
And, of course, this weekend we've got Canelo Alvarez and James Kirkland on the docket, expected to put 41,000 people in Minute Maid Park in Texas. Not bad for a sport that what people are insisting are dying, is it?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's actually a fantastic matchup. I mean, it's one of those rare, just can't miss action fights. I don't see how it couldn't be a fun fight to watch. The sad thing is that so many people are probably turned off by the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight that maybe they won't get the audience that it deserves. But I'm telling you, if you enjoy sports, if you enjoy a good fight, tune into that fight. I mean, these are just two warriors. I think Canelo wins the fight because I think he's going to attack a little bit more intelligently than Kirkland. But Kirkland really is, I think, the main reason that it's so much fun. This guy's just a wild man. He just goes in there and just swings away until either he knocks out the other guy, which is what generally happens, or he gets knocked out, which happened once. Anyway, really, really fun fight. And I hope people give it a chance after what happened the previous weekend.
Can Kirkland win with anything other than a puncher's chance? And is he a worthy opponent for Canelo, or is this more of just a Canelo showcase fight?
It's definitely not a Canelo showcase. Kirkland is proven enough that he's a legitimate threat to Canelo. He's when you say puncher's chance, he's got more than a puncher's chance. He's not much of a boxer, but he's a tremendous puncher, and he comes with crazy energy and a crazy style he's dangerous against anybody. Maybe it's a little bit of a question mark still because he's had his ups and downs, but I think he's a threat to anyone. This is a legitimate fight. This is not a gimme for Canelo. I guess the best thing for boxing is if this were incredibly entertaining and I guess that's the bottom line. As long as it's really entertaining, I think boxing wins. And maybe, if it's a fantastic fight, these guys do it again. I don't know. But to answer your question, Kirkland is a legitimate threat. He's not a gimme for Canelo.
We have to ask you, 10 years ago, Jose Luis Castillo versus Diego Corrales. What are your memories of that fight? And where do you think it ranks in the list of great slugfest fights?
I think it ranks right near the top of any fight that I've seen or heard of. I think that's sort of like the standard or the modern standard. That and the Gotti Ward fights, I guess. There's a lot of other good fights, but I think that maybe more, as much as any fight is sort of the standard of what a great fight is. We could even compare it to what happened with Mayweather and Pacquiao. Mayweather-Pacquiao, there was no ebbs and flows. There was just no drama. In the Castillo Corrales fight, it was like an action film. I mean, something different happened at every turn. One guy goes down, then the other guy goes down. One guy gets hurt, the other guy gets hurt, and it was just you didn't know what was going to happen next. And maybe what really stands out to me is the courage that these guys displayed. I mean, what Corrales went through to come back and knock out Castillo the way he did was just unbelievable and unforgettable. May he rest in peace. He was really one of the most exciting fighters of his time, and we need more of guys like that now.
Absolutely, hard to argue with that one. Kind of tailing off that point, what is your favorite fight ever? What is the fight that when you think of this is why I do this for a living, this is the fight is the reason why?
I think the one that jumps out to me first, the one that always seems to come to mind, is the first Holyfield-Tyson fight. Evander Holyfield had a couple of shaky fights, and he actually had a heart issue, mysterious heart issue before that. We didn't know what his future was going to be like. And he came in as a big underdog against Tyson. And, as you know, he ends up winning the fight in dramatic fashion. I wasn't crazy about Tyson at that time. I'm a little bit crazy guy. I just didn't like him. And Holyfield was kind of a stand-up guy. So it was good. It was good against evil. It was the underdog against this huge favorite. And, the underdog wins the good guy and underdog wins the fight. It was really, really, really dramatic because Tyson at that time still sort of had this aura of invincibility, even though he had lost. So to see that happen was really something special. The weirdest thing I've ever seen in boxing was the next one, was when he bit his ear off. But it just goes to show you anything can happen in boxing.
Absolutely, and anything can happen on this podcast as well, and we thank you so much for being part of it. Just remind people where they can find Ring Magazine on the internet, social media, all that fun stuff, and any other shout-outs or anything else you want to get off your chest. This is your time, my friend.
Oh, okay. Go to ringtv.com if you want to see our website. Our guys work really hard on that. At Ring Magazine for the Twitter, and for Facebook, it's just Ring Magazine. So, please come and visit us and check out what we're doing. We're working real hard.
Michael Rosenthal from Ring Magazine. Sean, that guy is just a fountain of knowledge. It was such a pleasure to have him aboard for our debut episode.
Yeah, I mean, he's so knowledgeable. He's so, he speaks so well. We learn a lot just listening to him talk. So it's definitely a pleasure to have him on the show this week. He's probably one of the better guests we'll have. Maybe we tease people a little bit, thinking that they're going to have these, amazing top tier guests every week, and we're going to aim for that for sure. But he was great.
Yeah, we'll keep shooting for the stars, but you're right, they don't get much better than Mike Rosenthal. I want to thank him for his time and his patience dealing with a couple of Canadian knuckleheads.
Absolutely, yeah.
Speaking of Canadian knuckleheads, let's talk about the Canadian scene, Sean. Fighter out of Trois-Rivières, Quebec, Mikhail Zuzki fought this past weekend in Vegas, coming up short in a 12-round decision to Konstantin Ponomarev, losing the NABF belt in the process. Scores 99-91, 97-92, and 98-92. You're high on Zuzki, aren't you?
Yeah, I've been a fan of him for a while. I got to see him fight on the undercard of Jean-Pascal Lucien-Boutet last year. I think he does a lot of things right. I think he's got good movement, good fight IQ. He punches hard. He's exciting to watch. He just came up short here. This was the opportunity, I think, to kind of take that next step. I mean, now Ponomarev is kind of ready for that next level. Maybe just Zuzki's not ready yet. I think he's still a good fighter. I wouldn't take too much away from this loss, but I think this fight he just kind of got outpointed. First fight in Las Vegas, I believe. So it's a learning lesson, and I think all good fighters need that big first loss to kind of figure out what they need to work on.
How big of a bump in the road is this for Zuzki's career, though? I mean, losing a belt in your first fight in Vegas, not an auspicious debut there.
No, it's definitely not. I mean, this is the thing with a lot of Montreal fighters, is that they look like killers on the local scene. Even winning the NABF title, it's not a world title, but it's still a somewhat prestigious title. So, he's looked like a killer in Montreal, and we see this a lot. We got so many guys you just don't know until they get until they try themselves at that next level. Zuzki, he tried and he failed at this level, and that doesn't mean he won't be back, but it just means that, as a young fighter, he's still got some tools to pick up, I think.
Well, we're looking forward to that, because I take your word as gospel, sir. So if you say Zuzki's one to watch, then definitely I'm going to get on that hype train right away. This weekend in Ontario, you mentioned off the top, Denton Daly returning to the ring, taking on Walter Cabral. Daly, he's coming off a KO loss here. Is that going to affect how he performs?
I mean, yeah, this is interesting because he's a little bit older. He just challenged for his first world title. He looked pretty good in that fight. I mean, I think he won the first 5 or 6 rounds. Kalenga took over the last half of the fight. It would have been a close decision. It felt like, it really was going to be one of those decisions that could have went either way. And, Kalenga's power finally caught up with Daly, knocked him down 2 or 3 times in that last round. Finally, the ref had enough. It really felt like the ref and the others really wanted to see Daly get to the decision just to see if he could bring it home. But there's just no way he could continue there. Like I said, he's a little bit older. If he's going to win a world title, it needs to be sooner than later. And I think, this weekend, I tried to get us press credentials. It's a kind of a closed event. But he should be able to go out there and get the win here, maybe get back on the right track, I think.
Why would they not give us press credentials? I mean, is there a ton of media covering this fight? You think they'd appreciate any bump they could get?
No, they have no media, actually. It's a closed event at...
What is this, Metamoris?
Yeah, exactly. I asked and they said no. There's not even any seats open to the public. You can buy a table, so it's one of those kind of fancier events, I guess you'd say. So, I mean, you and I could not go and just buy a seat for this event.
Yeah, I do not fit in well at those black tie affairs. I have the black tie, but I seem to forget my pants.
Yeah, the black tie kind of gets canceled out when you show up in your boxers.
Black tie required, pants are optional. But Daly taking on Walter Cabral. Is there any way Cabral wins this fight?
I'll admit that I don't know Cabral that well, but I think he's being brought in to lose. Unless Daly's chin is shot or his confidence is shot after that last fight, I think Daly should run him over and look towards another title shot sooner than later.
All right, let's talk about what else is going on in Quebec. Stephen Butler returning to action this weekend. He's got a lot of steam behind him as a prospect in Quebec. Tell me what I should watch for Stephen Butler.
Yeah, I'm really high on this kid. I don't have like an official list of my favorite prospects out of Quebec, but he's probably my second prospect after Yves Ulysse Jr. He's a good puncher. He's got really, really smart fight IQ. He looks for the knockout. He's he's had some close fights, which I think is actually a good thing because it kind of shows that he can kind of fight adversity. He's fighting this weekend. Another fighter. I don't have his name in front of me for some reason, but another fighter that he should be able to kind of run that record up a little bit more. And, expect to see him on undercards in the Bell Center again very soon. If Adonis Stevenson is back or Jean Pascal is back, this guy's going to be one of the feature fights on the undercard. So definitely, he's looking to move to 12-0, and I suspect that'll happen.
Yeah, taking on Felipe Teniente in Chicoutimi. So if you're in the Chicoutimi area, definitely check that out. And who knows, if Butler pans out the way that a lot of people seem to think he will, maybe one day we'll be talking about him in our Classic Fight segment. This is our Classic Fight segment of the week. We are going back in the Wayback Machine to Sugar Ray Leonard and Marvelous Marvin Hagler for the middleweight title. One of the great fights of all time as far as I'm concerned. And we chose this fight for a reason this week. There seemed to be an awful lot of parallels between this fight and what we saw leading up to Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao last weekend. Isn't that right, Sean Smith?
Yeah, there's so many parallels here. I guess we'll kind of go through them maybe one by one or a few at a time. But I mean, it's funny, like even the graphic on the Sugar Ray Leonard Marvin Hagler fight, it says the super fight. I mean, this was at the time one of the biggest grossing events, one of the biggest grossing fights in Las Vegas history. I mean, that was considered, maybe not the fight of the century, but right up there. And, Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao was kind of built the same way.
And you could even say that outside the ring, Sugar Ray was the early quote-unquote money. I mean, because this guy, as a middleweight, he was getting bigger purses than the heavyweights. And this is when heavyweight was the dominant division in the sport. Sugar Ray Leonard was the first guy to ever cross the $100 million mark in terms of fight purses. I mean, he was money.
Yeah, no, he absolutely was. I mean, you think of, whatever you want to call that group of of fighters from the 80s, the Four Kings or whatever you want to call them, Sugar Ray Leonard kind of led them towards that money. And, he kind of opened up a lot of doors for the smaller weight classes. I mean, yeah, we had a lot of great fighters before the late 70s and early 80s. You think of Sugar Ray Robinson and all of them, but they never made the kind of money that heavyweights did. I think Sugar Ray Leonard kind of broke that door down, and it's a good comparison. We picked a great fight here because Mayweather is kind of taking fight purses to the next level, kind of the same way that Leonard did.
And it's also similar in the fact that Leonard kind of picked his spot with this fight. This is a fight that people wanted to see for years. We thought it was going to happen much, much earlier than that in the early 80s. I remember when Ray Leonard called that big press conference just to announce, and he called Marvin Hagler out by name, but said he wasn't going to fight him because he was retiring. I don't think Marvin Hagler ever forgot that, and I don't think Marvin Hagler ever forgave Ray Leonard for that. But Leonard, he was comfortably retired, making a good living on endorsements and sitting in the broadcast booth. And he waited until he thought Hagler would be a beatable opponent. Hagler had just had that war with Mugabe, and it was then that Leonard saw something and he started beating those war drums again, much the same way how Mayweather kind of waited out Pacquiao until Pacquiao had the loss against Tim Bradley and, of course, the devastating knockout loss to Marquez as well. Then I think that's when Mayweather started getting serious about that fight.
No, I think you made an excellent point there. Mayweather kind of waited till Pacquiao slowed down a little bit. I'm not sure exactly what he saw, but he obviously saw something there. And it kind of feels like Sugar Ray Leonard did the same thing. And, in both cases, it worked out really well for them. In both fights, and I think maybe this is just a rule of boxing, but maybe, once the fighter is considered, if you give the fans time to really appreciate the fight and let the hype grow, it's always going to be bigger. Everyone talked about, Mayweather-Pacquiao was way bigger in 2015 than it probably would have been in 2010, despite them both being closer to the primes at that point. And I kind of feel like the same kind of rule works here. I mean, Sugar Ray Leonard definitely passed his prime. Hagler past his prime, and because they made the people wait, I think it just made this into a monstrous fight. You mentioned before we went on the air that you had a VHS, or you rented a VHS of this tape as a kid. I mean, tell me a little bit about that experience and what you thought of the fight at that point.
Yeah, that was something I got into boxing through the Rocky movies. That was my first exposure to the sport as a very, very small child. And so it just grew from there that, when my dad would take me to the local video store to pick out a movie for the night, I started gravitating towards the sports section. And there wasn't a lot of fights available, especially growing up in Peterborough, Ontario. It's not like we have a wide selection.
Peterborough.
Yeah, there you go, man. I think Hagler Hearns was there. Leonard Hagler was there. A couple other heavyweight fights, a couple other greatest hits profiles of certain boxers. But I remember renting this tape and just being just amazed by it. Leonard with his flashiness and his showboating, and even Hagler, who just came forward and just looked like he wanted to knock Leonard's head off the whole time. It was high drama, and even for a kid as young as I was kind of hooked right away. When did you first see this fight?
I would say it was considerably later. I was probably, in my mid to late teens. It was probably just kind of, surfing YouTube sort of thing. Probably 2006, 2007 sort of thing. You hear about Sugar Ray Leonard. As a young kid, I watched a few of the Mike Tyson fights with my uncle. He was a massive Mike Tyson fan, and just being around boxing, you hear that name a lot. So when they had this engine in YouTube that you were able to watch, so many fights kind of right in front of you. That's probably when I watched this fight for the first time. You mentioned you watched this as a kid. I mean, were you on board with Sugar Ray Leonard? Do you remember who you favored in this fight? Was it good versus evil?
No, I didn't know enough about the fighters to really, have a dog in the fight. I knew who Sugar Ray Leonard was because Sugar Ray Leonard was obviously a bigger name. You saw him on commercials and you saw him on talk shows, things of that nature. So I knew who Ray Leonard was. I didn't, at that point, being that young, have a good grip on who Marvin Hagler was or how great he was. I guess Sugar Ray was, my de facto favorite just because I knew the name and I knew the man, so to speak. But I became a Sugar Ray Leonard fan after this fight, and a Hagler one too. I went back and I rented that Hagler Hearns tape as well, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a subsequent episode.
Yeah, no, that's one of the classic fights. We would be remiss not to talk about that at some point. It's such an epic fight. We both went back and watched this fight. It's readily available on YouTube. If you want to watch it, definitely go ahead. I want to talk a little bit about the scorecards. Did you score it when you watched it again?
I didn't score it actually because I didn't break it down round by round by that. I just kind of watched it as a fan again. But it was a very close fight. I mean, the way I saw it, Leonard came out at the gate flying. Hagler came out in that orthodox stance, and just he looked like he gave away a lot of the earlier rounds.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think Leonard, I think he won the first 4 rounds, just using that movement. And it's funny that we talk about Mayweather running because Sugar Ray Leonard was literally running around the ring. I mean, just circling to his side, he'd punch, he'd throw a combo, and he'd keep circling. And I think, Hagler's inability to cut off the ring really hurt him in those early rounds. Like I said, I thought Leonard won the first 4, and from there Hagler won most of the remaining rounds, but
it wasn't until the middle rounds where, to me, Hagler looked like he finally started to get the fight that he wanted. Sugar Ray slowed down a bit, and it almost looked like Leonard was content to almost rope-a-dope in the later stages. I don't know if that's because he got tired or what, but it was a different Leonard as the fight wore on, I found.
No, absolutely. It is a tale of 2 fights, really, because, those first 4 or 5 rounds, you had Leonard, on his bike. He was running around, and then I think he got tired. He had to rope-a-dope because just his legs were getting tired. The one scorecard, it caught me off guard at the end. We had 115, 113 Leonard. That makes sense to me. 115, 113 Hagler. That makes sense to me. 118, 110 for Sugar Ray Leonard was the other card. That is 10 rounds to 2. That is nuts.
Yeah, I don't agree with that card at all. I think what that judge may have been influenced by was, and Sugar Ray, perhaps, but what he may have been influenced by was, and this is Sugar Ray's strategy, he's come out and said this publicly, at the last 30 seconds, he had his corner scream out 30, 30, 30, and it was Leonard's strategy to just completely turn it on in the last 30 seconds of every round and look to steal rounds that way. And, if that's something that kind of lulled that judge in, maybe that explains that card. That's the only thing I can come up with other than your explanation of drugs.
Yes. I'm still going to stick with drugs, but that card is absolutely baffling to me because I thought this fight, I don't have a problem with anyone who had it for Hagler. I don't have a problem with anyone who had it for Leonard. This was a very close fight, though. I can't see it any other way. Every round I watched, yes, there were some close rounds that could have went either way. I thought round 6 and round 8 were both very close. I thought rounds 10 to 12 were all very close as well. But even that being said, I still think either way, 118, 110 is 10 rounds to 2. How do you only give Hagler 2 rounds of that fight?
Yeah, that is completely puzzling to me. And Marvin Hagler was extremely disappointed with that decision. You saw it on his face. You saw it in the way he reacted to Leonard after the scorecards were read. Marvin Hagler was a guy that never felt he got the respect he deserved in the sport. He was almost like a middleweight Larry Holmes that way. He felt like he was always on the short end of the stick. And this drove Hagler nuts to the point where he retired after this fight. He said, screw it, I'm packing up, I'm moving to Italy, have your sport, I don't want it anymore.
Yeah, and I would say, now that we, I think these 4 kings, as I'll call them, along with Hearns and Duran, I think they're fairly celebrated at this point. I think Hagler gets considerably more respect than Larry Holmes ever does, I think. You were a little more around during that time, but, to me, I don't think Larry Holmes gets any respect at all. So I don't think that Hagler is exactly accurate there, but, fighters always think they won the fight. Leonard thought that this, in the post-fight interview I watched, he did one with Larry Merchant, not right after the fight, but in studio. He didn't think it should be a split decision. He thought he won handily, and obviously Hagler felt the same way. A lot of it comes down to what do you score? Do you score, ring control? Because, Hagler was the one moving forward, but Leonard, I thought, was landing the better punches. So a lot of this comes down to, what do you score in a fight?
Very good point. And I just want to throw another couple of Maypac comparisons in here. We had the power puncher versus the slick counter puncher, and the more defensive fighter there. We've kind of talked on that. But why do you think Hagler looked so tentative coming out of the gate? The same way Pac did against Floyd. It was a departure from what we've been accustomed to seeing from both fighters in that respect.
I think when you've got that finesse fighter that comes out and uses a lot of movement, it can be hard to track them down until the later rounds, when I think they start to slow down a little bit more. If you just keep that same beat of moving forward, you can kind of work their way down. So I think part of it is just waiting for them to slow down. And in Hagler's case, it worked a little bit better than it did for Mayweather. Mayweather didn't really slow down. Pacquiao ended up slowing down more, I think, a little bit, but Leonard did slow down, and Hagler was able to land some big punches as the fight wore on. I think it's just a calculation as to when to turn that temperature up, and I think Hagler was just a little bit off. If he turns it off, or if he turns it on maybe one round sooner, maybe this fight goes to him. So it's really that calculation, I think, of when do you turn the pace up so that you have enough left at the end of the fight, but your opponent is exhausted.
We saw Hagler dancing after that fight was over, before the scorecards were read. Marvin Hagler is not a guy who dances. I don't know if that was a psych up thing or if he was playing to the judges, but it was a real departure of character, I thought, for Marvin Hagler. And of course, as soon as the scorecards are read, I don't think he ever danced a step again. But what did you think of that? Did you think that was just trying to send a message to Leonard, to the judges, to the fans? I mean, it just looks so out of character for the guy. Or was he just having fun in there?
Well, I think part of it was that he thought he won the fight. I mean, he thought he was the one coming forward. I guess he thought that he was landing the punches. I mean, being the bigger, stronger guy, he was probably landing the harder punches anyway. So maybe, if you barely feel Leonard's punches, maybe you don't think they're really landing that well. But to the judges and to the fans, it looked like Leonard was really putting together his combinations well at many points in the fight, especially early on. So I think it was just a show that, I just came out here and schooled this guy, but he didn't actually. I think he thought that he won the fight.
One interesting thing that may have swayed judges in Leonard's favor in those closer rounds, I noticed that when Leonard hit Hagler, the punches made a lot more pop. They were just louder, and that may have had an influence on people watching that fight, because Hagler, I think we're in agreement, hits much harder than Ray Leonard. But when he was landing those short uppercuts, they weren't making, that pop sound that Leonard was making.
I think that's a really good point, and I felt like I noticed that during the fight too. It felt like Leonard's punches were loud, and I don't know how he does that. I don't know. I mean, is there a technique to doing that properly? But in MMA, I don't want to talk about it too much, but when someone lands a kick that slaps like that, it often means that it wasn't that hard of a shot, as opposed to the one that kind of has the thud. It digs in a little bit more. So I don't know if it's something similar to that. I mean, I don't know what the explanation is there. What do you think? I mean, what kind of answer is there to why one fighter's punches would be louder than the others?
I really don't have an explanation, and if there's someone out there that's listening and can explain that to me, I would much appreciate that, because it is an interesting phenomenon, because it's one of those just little things that if a round is really, really close, maybe a judge looks at that and says, well, you know what, Leonard appeared to be hitting Hagler more often and harder because I could hear those shots.
Right. No, absolutely. I agree. It felt that way, and as someone trying to judge the fight or watch the fight, you have to try and ignore that, but it's not easy. And having the crowd on Leonard's side may have worked in his favor as well, because Sugar Ray Leonard, like you talked about, he's on commercials, he's kind of all over the place doing work for different brands. I mean, the fans love him way more than they love Hagler, so that probably helped as well.
Yeah, I would agree on that point as well. As much as judges try to do their job and try to tune out the crowd, there is an aspect of that where every time a guy lands a shot, 18,000 people go crazy. It is hard to tune out.
Absolutely, and I think that's really difficult for a judge. You're sitting ringside, you've got however many thousand people right behind you screaming. I mean, it's hard to just focus in on the fight. I think that's a very difficult thing for judges to do. And I mean, I don't know if it helps or not, but I mean, I thought this fight was super close, could have went either way. And it's an excellent fight, very good fight.
Check it out on YouTube if you haven't seen it. Sugar Ray Leonard and Marvin Hagler, two of the greatest of all time. And one last point I want to raise. We've seen it time and time again in boxing. Guys come back when they're supposedly over the hill and they get schooled. Sugar Ray Leonard sitting on the sidelines for the amount of years he did, coming back and defeating Marvin Hagler for the title without a tune-up fight. Does that make it the greatest comeback of all time in the sport?
Oh man, that is a tough one to say. I mean, you think about Muhammad Ali. Obviously, he took off 3 years, I think, and he came back and won 2 world titles after that, I believe. So I would probably go with Ali still. I mean, just because Ali, I mean, he didn't have his legs the way he did during his previous run, so he had to kind of, use his hands a little bit more, use the rope-a-dope a little bit more. He completely changed his style. So I would say that it's up there, it's on the list, but it's not number one. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, Ali, I think this is one thing that you mentioned earlier, that when you have the crowd in the palm of your hand, you see things a certain way. We've been so accustomed to calling Ali the greatest of all time that we really kind of look back at that as the gold standard, and maybe we should. But I was really intrigued by this just as a narrative, because these are two guys that circled each other for years. We thought we were never going to be able to see it, and all of a sudden Ray Leonard says one day, it was by choice. Ali's was by force.
True.
That's another thing to think about here. Ali, when he had diminishing returns in the late 70s and early 80s, I'm not sure we had the same conversation, right? But Leonard deciding to stand up from the commentary table and saying, I can beat the champ, I can beat that guy in the ring, and then going and doing it. I mean, I love this. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's a fantastic narrative. The other thing that I think is interesting to touch on is, for a fight to do really well, a boxing match, do we need that good versus evil? I mean, we had to have Sugar Ray build him up as this hero, and Hagler as kind of the enemy, and we kind of did the same thing with Pacquiao Mayweather. I mean, how important do you think that narrative is to how well a fight does?
Well, good versus evil is the oldest story in the book, right? Yeah. I mean, it's the easiest thing to throw money at. Even look at something like Lennox Lewis and Mike Tyson. I mean, that's something that did huge money as well. Mm-hmm. And Tyson was, of course, the bad guy at that point. I don't think you necessarily need it. I think there's been some great fights where there wasn't some classic fights, some big money fights where there wasn't necessarily a good versus evil dynamic, but it certainly helps. I mean, it's easy to sell. I mean, we grow up in a world where there's, that kind of story permeates not just sports, not just, entertainment, but pretty much everything. You've got people at your job that you think are the good guy and the bad guy. So it's an easy thing to relate to, and it's an easy thing for people to want to see, the bad guy get their comeuppance and the good guy ride off into the sunset, the way Ray Leonard did here.
Absolutely. No, you nailed it. I don't think a fight necessarily needs it per se, but it definitely helps. And we saw here, I mean, it definitely helps a fight do really good numbers.
Absolutely. And that's why it is our classic fight of the week. Well, that is it for the debut edition of the Standing 8 Count. We hope you had just as much fun as we did. Don't forget to follow us on the Twitter at standing_8 count. That's standing_8 count. And on the Facebook at facebook.com/S8C podcast. That's S8C podcast. Join us next week for more boxing banter and pugilistic prognostication. For Sean W. Smith, I am Carlin Bardsley, and until we meet again, the bell has sounded.